just a brief introduction about me. I'm Atul Rathore, Managing Architect with Capgemini right now. I have been earlier head of data analytics with private banks in Switzerland, and I am chartered member of TCS with a few titles, including International Professional, Europe Engineer, Chartered Engineer, and so on. What I do is all about data, aligning business strategy and data strategy for next generation data infrastructure. And all these things comes with, you can say, a lot of buzzwords we see. I will explain a little later. Just a disclaimer, these views and discussion points which are presented today are personal and my professional experience over many years, and these do not reflect any views of my organization with whom I have worked in my journey so far. So key themes I will consider is not a slide. These are not the slide titles. These are more like themes which I've incorporated in the slides which will come up. So for you, I will try to give you overview of some understanding of data migration lifecycle, the role of data architecture to make it happen, how to manage complex migrations in high-stake environments, and what are the key considerations to do so, including strategy, engagement, and tooling. Now, key aspect which I would like to bring in here is about how and why data migration should have right sponsors. We need to align with executive briefings. So when we deal with CXO or board level, we need to make sure we understand data strategy, the architecture behind it, and the diagram you see on the right side is on the top. This is our vision, where we want to be. At the bottom, you see where we are and the path or mission we need to take. And these are small circles are more like objectives we need to achieve while we are on a mission to achieve our vision. And as you know, this approach from enterprise perspective require synergy between people, technology, and process. All these things need to be harmonized. Particularly a well-defined data strategy roadmap is very important in any organization. And that's where we need a structured approach or methodical approach. We need to understand the vision, we need to understand, or we don't have defined data strategy to achieve there or reach there. One of the very important thing which I have seen over last few years is capability model. I will explain what it looks like, but this is one of the very important thing. It doesn't take long to create it, but it helps in prioritizing and monetizing what capability we need for any data strategy and data migration. And it also helps in when we try to achieve this mission path, what are the roadmap or during this mission we should achieve. So for example, it's a very good example is like there was vision by JFK to reach moon. But then they have a mission how to do it. They need to develop jet engines, rockets, and so on. So each component itself becomes a small objective to achieve or to achieve in short term, whereas in long term to materialize the vision. Now, here what you see in any data model, the foundation platform is important. How and where is data authoritative data source? We need to understand it. We can have multiple different architectures to deliver it, but we need to understand. So authoritative data source is something which is commonly used instead of data like one data source or data truth and so on. There are different words. Authoritative sources may be clone or replica of that, where we have right data approved by the business. Now, key here is whenever we have any data migration, we need to understand the requirements, business requirements, the team which is exhaustive and exclusive to deliver it. No one person can have all the skill set. That's why it's called exclusive and exhaustive team. And obviously data management principles and capabilities to make it happen. Now, moving to the next slide, which is, one moment. Sorry, where I am. Yeah, right. So what you see here is, initially I mentioned about capability model. So here what you see on the diagram is small. There is no need to read it. But here we see capabilities required. There are streams like data management, data governance, data architecture, and like there are so many streams you can see. And for every stream, you need certain capabilities to make it happen. These have dependencies. So dotted line you can see makes it that to do something data management, you will need certain tool or something. Or to migrate or implement certain technology, you may need certain capability. So this diagram helps sort out the dependencies as well as understand the flow of the strategy you need to define for data migration. Now, what you see here is the system is not very complex, but to make it happen, we have to create simple rules which can be applied again and again for evolution of complex rules. This is one of the key principles we need to follow. Never try to do complex thing in one go. Always use simple rules to make it happen. Now, what makes it more difficult? With all these new technologies like cloud, and what we have is uh, modern technology stack. So for each capability, you will find a lot of different technologies or products available in the market. For example, I will just name few of those leading ones. Like if we want to do data quality, Anomalo is one of the good tool for security, online identity security, FIDO02, for CI/CD, data CI/CD, DBT, data privacy via Velotics. And if there is a endless list, hundreds or thousands of these products available in the market, and whole migration and integration of this technology makes it much more complex. Key buzzword you see coming up is for data democratization and data monetization. Now, for data democratization, again, you need certain capabilities using certain tools or technology with Presto, Alteryx, maybe Lakehouse type of target with Databricks, Dremio, Snowflake, Delta Lake. It could be from any hyperscaler, including Azure, Google, or AWS. Some sort of data computing. Normally, we call it big data analytics. So there are tools again, or niche areas like Starbucks provide such things. We have data storage for high volume, which are very niche in terms of high speed and accuracy and performance, like yellow breaks and so on. Hitachi Vitaria device provide the device type of storage and so on. So if you see, when we try to achieve this, what you will see is we need to have goals and plans with all these technologies. We need skill set in the team to make it happen. And what is the end goal we are looking for? It's three C's. So what you see is end of day for data, we look for compliance and regulatory and legal policies to be confirmed when we migrate data. It should bring in customer experience with minimum downtime and what they need. So normally there's a good saying, right data to right people at right time. that is the best if we can achieve. And obviously competitive advantage edge. So when we do data migration, the applications running on top of it or insights being created will give competitive edge to the organization. And that's why this becomes key to identify during data migration what are these requirements. So we need to categorize those into groups: compliance related, customer related, and competitive edge. And now priority will be obviously the customer, but without compliance, we cannot go live. Whether security, data privacy, cyber security, GDPR, there's DPA, there's so many regulatory requirements all over the world, including regions, countries, and also in the sector of business. Financial have their own regulatory requirement, public sector have their own, and so on. So whenever we do this migration strategy, categorize those migration requirement into these three buckets. It helps us to align what is minimum required. Now, what you see here is when we do data migration, normally we have to start with starting point and end game. So we always start with heat map, identify the use case for data migration. Then as I mentioned earlier, we create a capability model, what we need to do, the target architecture going forward to achieve those. So data migration itself is a full project, if you see. So when we talk about target architecture, data migration do require a full-fledged architecture to do so. Here, I'm not talking about small data migration, but very large. So perhaps if you know, NHS Fine was one of the largest public sector data migration, and Sharon and I were part of it. Then in few banks, there have been full migration of systems from older banking system to new one. And again, it's a complete technology refresh from existing as is to be greenfield. And hence the technology, target architecture, and product selection becomes a key here. And when we select product, one of the key special point is to consider integration. If two products don't integrate, that will be the biggest challenge, and we will be wasting a lot of time and effort in doing so. So when we try to do data migration, we need to understand the process model for this. And hence, if you see here, middle, so we have to make this a workflow, a process that is feasible to conduct to go through this life cycle of data migration. It includes normal project we do in IT is exactly the same. We start with use case, architecture, technology design, and product selection. Then, again, what you see here is where we want to be. Now, we don't want to consider gold-plated and target operating model. So what we again do is we consider or divide these capabilities, which I have discussed earlier, into logical grouping. For example, one of these could be data management, data governance, data ingestion, data storage, data publishing, and so on. And when we group these capabilities in logical blocks, then we need to identify the ownership of this. This is a key because whenever we do any data migration, the data operating model is the one of the ownership model. Normally, it should be centralized. Not everything should be owned by IT. What we need is a business as a part of this journey. And hence, you see color coding, which is very small to read, but normally what happens is you identify IT owned centralized block, which are more related to technology or platform, whereas the yellow bit, for example, will be the business ownership, where is a more related to data. So data as such belongs to a domain within an organization. Data domain has their ownership, data owner, data steward, and they understand data better than us. We are technologists, we are IT people, but they understand data better than us. And that's where the ownership and understanding of semantics, where they can provide the right input in doing so. Now, when we try to define where we want to be, we have seen, like, we have created a capability model. So capability model again comes in, you can say, levels. So level one is very high level, where it only tries to give bigger blocks like data ingestion, data storage, data compute, AI insights, data publishing, data integration. But to implement or execute, we need to define then level 2 and level 3 capability models, which are sub capabilities within each of those. For example, data ingestion. Do we need data streaming? Do we need batch data transfer, or we need a very large data transfer using data box or something? So those are the key level of sub capabilities required to understand the level of granularity we need. And that's where the data platform design comes into picture. We need to consider what is vital for the business to deliver, what are the technologies which are viable to it. For example, if we try to start using FTP to transfer petabyte of data, will never happen. So what we do, the best option, okay, let's go for a terabyte of data box or some sort of device which can be used to transfer data, and the value to it. So again, this is the key criteria. So whenever we consider any transformation, data transformation, time, cost, quality is key criteria to consider. Cost is something which comes in two forms, tangible and intangible. It is easier to get numbers for tangible cost, whereas for intangible, it's all, as I mentioned, it has to be based on experience, for example, for compliance, customer experience, and competitive edge it can provide. And then once we understand those sub-capabilities, we try to define gap matrix. This is where we try to understand if we, where, like on the right side column, you will have where we are. On the top row is where we want to be. So we can always map, if it is green, those particular things to continue. If it's red, that means those will be replaced. Or is it amber, where it needs to change? And that's where we identify the quantity or the capacity of work required for each capabilities. This is one of the very good example to always finding capability model, then gap analysis to make it success for migration strategy. Another thing which is commonly used is in large data migration called morphological analysis. So this is very famous in particularly in European side or banking sector, where what we do is try to do is for any capability at column one, there could be multiple options. In architecture and design, we always have multiple options. For example, we want to ingest data. It could be streaming, real-time, batch, file-based, or binary objects, whatever, right? So we try to document, against each capability or sub-capability or function, we try to write what are all the options in the row. So for the first row, you will see whatever it is, there are 4 options, for example. We keep doing this for each function or capability. When we do it, And then we try to see based on certain data migration and scope. So we don't follow one single approach. There will be multiple approach depending on data categorization, classification. So example, there is historical data, operational data, reference data, metadata. There will be a lot of different categories of data we talk about. Each one may have a different approach. And this is where we try to create a path. So for example, if you see the pink text, so for one particular type of data category, say reference data, we say, okay, option 2 is better for first function, for next function, option 3 for migration, storage, compute, data quality checks, validation. So then we try to join them. And this becomes the approach we need to take for that particular data set. So if we're talking about, for example, master data management, we say, okay, this is the right path for master data management or operational data. Historical data has a different behavior. Do we need immediately? May not. We may have some different way of data ingestion or data storage. So we create a different path for it. And this type of approach helps to identify or categorize different approaches for each category of data identified. And it helps a lot in terms of now defining the whole plan. Okay, for this particular category, we have so much volume of data, and this is the way to do it. Okay. Now, for each of those options or approach, we may have again multiple patterns. Now, patterns are something, it includes anti-pattern patterns as well. So patterns are not just patterns, it have anti-patterns as well. What we do, we try to identify based on experience or based on well-formed architecture or guardrails, guidelines, or some sort of expertise, subject matter expertise. We say, okay, for each of these, we need to follow this particular pattern or model to execute, to make it or complete that particular activity or task for delivering of those capabilities. Now here what you see is uh, yeah, applying certain good frameworks. Once we know what we to do using, or we understand capabilities, we understand approach, we understand options to be considered, patterns to be applied. Now we to deliver it, what we do is then we start involving certain frameworks. So normally in modern era right now, we or the organization look for standard structured approach aligning to TOGAF or ITIL, not or and ITIL and SAFE skill agile framework. So combination of these gives a good framework and create an ecosystem for successful data migration. Now TOGAF is very big. There's a particular section, I think 5.3.3, I don't exactly remember, but that's the section where it talks about how you align delivery of data transformation using scaled agile. So it has been announced, so TOGAF 9.2, and that those principles you can find there. In modern era, we want to fail fast and fail successfully. So any large program, so something like data migration, we do V model testing. V model is like we have architecture design, high level design, low level design, technical, and so on right side. And on the other side, we have unit testing, functional testing, UAT, and system testing aligning to those. So that's why it's called V testing. And it's very good for uh, cover or provide a coverage from top down to fail, to make sure if we fail successfully and we know where we failed. We also want to fail fast, and fail fast means we never start data migration with a big bang approach. So normally it is it has been proven that if we take four stage or four types of uh, prototyping, like first is proof of technology, which is more about the technology you want to use is working. Make sure, and it's a a small proof of technology. Like we say, okay, let's deploy this for your technology or product and see it works. Yes, so we understand, yes, technology works. Then we move to proof of concept. Proof of concept is more about proving the solution. So as we have defined our approach and based on morphological approach, we see all these things need to be connected. That's where proof of concept comes into picture. So we connect those dots and try to say, yes, it works, it integrates, and there is no issues or stopper. And then the next comes is something called lighthouse. We want to involve business. So when we see proof of concept is working, what we do is try to create something which is demonstrable and can be demoed to the business to see how it looks like. It's their data, they understand better, and they know it. So why not demo it to them and agree with them? And that helps in a long-term migration because they will fully involved in the journey. And as we know, agile delivery we do for programming software. Similar agile way of delivery is good for data as well. There we call it CI/CD. Here we have data ops, and similarly we need to follow all those good agile ways like minimal viable product, minimal viable architecture. It's a new concept in SAFe, but it's very good. So we don't want to create or create big documents, artifacts. We always create, we define based on morphological and the mission we understand. We try to define architecture roadmap, and MVA is for each objective. We create a minimal viable architecture document. It's a small few pages, cover all the stakeholders or key stakeholders, and then we follow a service-oriented delivery of life cycle. So when we work for any digital transformation, why is called service? Because any data migration, we nowadays talk about data mesh, data product, and when we talk about product has services. When we talk about services, service needs to be delivered. And that's where it's important to understand how we group these services via minimal viable architecture, and there's another term called minimal viable design. So we do minimal design for those services and try to deliver within that scope. There will be a lot of things to deliver, but to ring fence the scope, it's always good to create MVA, MVD, and follow the service delivery model. These things I have discussed, so let's move to the next one. And yes, the one of the key area is risk. So everything starts from beginning. So when we start our journey, we have capability model, we have capability maps to function, and function maps to technology to deliver it. But each of these translations, we need to identify risk, or we also make assumptions. Now, it's worth noting that assumptions are also a risk. So whenever we create assumptions, we should also align with the risk, because assumptions are something which we are not confirmed that it will work. That's why we assume it. And once we have risk, we try to identify those risks or categorize those, uh, and then we try to mitigate it. Again, mitigation should be partial, not fully. Full mitigation is very difficult to achieve. So what we do is we try to mitigate, for example, 80% of the risk. If there is some residual risk, 20%, we try to address separately. Like, for example, if we're trying to automate something, we cannot automate 100%. So we say, okay, we are semi-automating. There is a need for manual intervention to do something else or certain task. So that's a mitigation as well. And we have to keep reviewing it, monitoring it, and control it. These are three key principles we need to understand and follow. Now, in terms of summary, so in any data strategy or data migration strategy or architecture, we need to see what is required in terms of long-term strategy. We are not doing migration for short-term. It's to achieve a strategy or IT strategy or data strategy for long-term, 2 to 5 years normally. We should always try to have target data operating model aligned to the strategy. Even though there may be some technical depth, we need to identify those technical depths and also identify the intermittent state we are trying to create is not destructive in nature, it's incremental in nature. So we can add further to be closer to strategy, then trying to decommission it and establish new one. Hence, any intermittent steps we do should be aligned to strategy. Though it may be part, but it always helps to reduce the technical depth going forward and align the strategy. All other things here see on the slide are the good practices to follow. TOGA, FITIL, SAFE, having target operating model, MVA, MVT in a scale agile, uh, aligned to scale agile. And then one thing I will also include here is always have a small team so deliverable when we identify Reiki or Parky. A small team is always easy to manage and effective in delivery or small portion of or small part of the program. There is a well-known saying, if you buy a pizza and it's enough for a team, that's the right size of the team. And that we should keep in mind going forward. Yeah, I think that's all from me. Hopefully, I have taken half an hour. Yes, I did.
I've got some questions. Anybody on the line got any questions?
Yeah.
I've got some.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you very much, Atul. That's been really, really interesting and insightful. We've got some sound issues in the room because we're using a speaker on the actually on my laptop. But so, are there any questions first and foremost from the remote attendees? Anybody got anything? If you want, either pop it in the chat, or if you want, just raise your hand. We can go from there. Really, if anybody's got any questions. Greg?
Yeah, I'll go, just to say thank you very much, Atul. Appreciate it. It's good to listen to. I thought I knew lots of acronyms. You've added a few more to my lexicon. I've had to use my new friend ChatGPT to look up some of those. I won't tell you which ones because it's embarrassing. Maybe I should know them. I guess my only question is, and you might get into this anyway, it's a concrete example of a data migration that you've worked on recently. And what I'm most interested in, I guess, is the mistakes that were made and the problems that you ran into.
Yes. So the recent one has been with the bank I was working with, Swiss Bank. In any such big data or large data migration program, we have three key aspects: people, process, and technology. Technology is easiest part of it.
Yep.
Process is the second one, where what I present today helps in having a right approach and process with right artifacts to support it with analysis, right frameworks. But people are the key here, both IT as well as business. And in fact, finding IT people is still easier. but aligning with business is the very important part of it. And that's where we underestimate it. We shouldn't forget, for example, while working with the bank, when we were migrating, business or priority is the business, not technology or data migration. They still are in a BAU mode, support or contribute to their business. So contribution from them, the commitment required is the key important part. And also the right business stakeholders. So for example, in any organization, when we have a data organization, this is still lacking everywhere, the maturity of data organization. Having a right data domains, data owner, data domain owner, data domain stewards, and expert in those areas. And the challenge comes here is when these business people who understand their application and data very well, they understand the semantics, but they are unable to relate to the technical stuff. We may have database schema. We talk about table 1, column B. They don't understand table 1, column B, right? They understand business semantics. And that's where one of the key important bit what I learned after struggling for pretty long being head of data is it become very common in finance industry called EBOM, Enterprise Business Object Model. So what we do is like data lineage is horizontal, like so we understand data from source to target horizontally. EBOM is more from top down. So what we try to do here is to address those challenges. We create enterprise business object, which business understand. So they understand the process, they understand business object. Now, for example, customer is a business object. It can have certain business attributes. Then we map it to logical model, then physical model. And that's where the semantic lineage is important to understand. And for that, we need to have business and IT alignment and the people who are working closely to make it happen. Hope I answered your question, Greg.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Atul. I'll leave it to others.
I've got an example, Atul and Greg, fairly recently, really, which kind of ties in with some conversations we had before the meeting started. And what this was a contracts management system. And I always start with, right, what's my source database? You know, what's my data model on the source? And then what's my target? Where am I moving it to, right? And will it go there? And profile that data on the source system. And there were beyond 40 years worth of transactions on the source system. And when we did the profiling of it, transactions that were, you know, beyond 15 years had a completely different classification of types of contract, right? So the data just wouldn't align onto the new system unless we actually bespoke that new system to say cope with all this historic data. So that was a problem, right? Is what do you do? It's going to cost you to be not just bespoke that system, but to ongoing bespoke it as every change is made. You know, the supplier is going to charge you even more because they're going to have to test it on your bespoking, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, you ask the obvious question, right? What's your retention period, right? So if it is 7 years, then jobs are good and we'll just dump this data somewhere. You can look it up in a different way and we won't migrate it. But contracts, it isn't as simple as that. It took a long time to get a business decision to say, well, actually, the minimum is 30 years. You've got to keep it for at least 30 years if it's of legal, right? So we had to do something with it. But those are the kind of things that I'm trying to get at, is you're not just looking at your current transaction set, you're looking at your history and you know, and making those decisions and thinking about cost. So that's what one thing. In the end, we actually asked the current supplier of this system because they were creating an archive system for somebody else, and basically we just kept the historic data onto that and paid a shed load of money to keep a license for something that actually it would have been nice if we could migrate it. But those are the practicalities. It was cheaper than doing anything else. And I think the other problem that I've come across in later years is that at one point, you know, your data schema was pretty transparent on your source system and your target system, so you could do that mapping. You could feel whether the data would get across and whether it would behave correctly. It's all about the data behaving correctly on the new system. But more so, you can't even get the data models from the supplier, right? So organisations are faced with actually spending a lot of money to the suppliers for them to do the migration when they don't understand the source data. So you've got that as another problem, is you sort of proxying it to the new supplier whose interest it is to support that as software as a service, for example. But yeah, so those are some problems that I've kind of come across recently.
Sharon, that's a very good point, and that reminds me of I have not covered in the presentation. So what happens is nowadays, if you see, most organizations are looking for Mendelian architecture, and that Mendelian architecture provides they call it bronze, zone, silver, and gold. So what Sharon pointed out, the problem, understanding the source, aged data where we don't have any documentation or doesn't align, schema doesn't align, we don't know how we don't have any metadata available. So we migrate first into bronze as is. Then from bronze to silver, then we try to transform it. And transformation here we do is, so there are two types of transformation. One is technical, second is business. So in technical transformation, we try to align like format, types, and those type of things which we know what we need. So if you type character, we want to have numeric, for example, date should be in DTMM, YYYY, and so on. So for the data we have in bronze, we try to do technical transformation first in the bronze. And then from silver, we try to apply business transformation. That's where the logical or integrity of data is consolidated in terms of what we need data quality as well, for example. So if we have a table, for example, 3 or 4 entities, are they correctly integrating? And that's where we apply business rule. There could be one rule, multiple rules, or there could be some, I've always found there are gaps as well. We cannot cover all the business rules to transform data. That again has a challenge on its own, and how we address that by going through multiple cycles and so on. There are different methods, but yes. So, Saran, what you mentioned is quite good. So, Mendelian architecture do address such issues going forward and in future.
One of the other things, just to add on to your testing advice, is I always advise as well, once the data has got onto the new system, use the reports on that system to cross-check all the data that, you know, you do your reconciliation anyway, you're counting your data, make sure you've got it all, but use the reports that that come with the package on the target system and make sure that they look right, compare them with what you had on the old system, you know, really go through that and use that as a means of assurance that it looks like all the data got migrated correctly. And very often you will find mistakes in those reports. And then you've got to ask the question, is it the report or is it the data that I put on there? So that for me is always a good technique to try.
Thank you, Sean. Any other questions online or from the floor? Anybody? Any questions or thoughts?
Will these slides be available to us on?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, yeah.
Ato, are you able to provide the slides?
Yeah.
Are you happy to do that?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Because obviously we couldn't
Yeah.
see some bits of it.
Yeah. So normally what we do is this will be recorded. Obviously, the questions won't be, but
yeah.
But we post the audio and the video of the presentation plus the slides onto the same place on the BCS website. Yeah. I mean, if there's no other question, I'd just like that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Just let him know. Just let him speak here first. Atul, thank you very much for the presentation. Can you hear me okay? Or do I need to come closer?
Yeah, it would be better if you come closer.
No problem.
Yeah.
I was just curious. There's a bit of a trend these days of moving away from relational databases in the marketplace. Do you have any recent examples of large data migrations that have taken place where they've gone from architecturally different technologies? So going from a relational database to NoSQL or something similar to that, and any of the challenges that you met whilst doing that?
Yes. So if you have I didn't mention at the start of my presentation, advanced analytic data platform. So nowadays, every organization has aspiration to use Gen AI, ML, all those things, advanced analytics, right? And to implement those, they need next generation data infrastructure. That's the word normally used. And when we talk about next generation data infrastructure, its foundation is data lake. And when we talk about data lake, we talk about data which is not relational. It could be in any format, image, audio, video, or text, whatever. So normally, currently I'm working for one of the public sector. I can't name it for a reason. So yeah, but there we are migrating data which is well structured, okay, into data lake. And again, there are different technologies implemented. So is using Delta Lake and Databricks on top of it. But the data is going in data lake in the file system storage as a part of binary objects. So yes, we are moving away from RDBMS or DBMS to more of a NoSQL type of storage. But what it requires is data management and governance on top of it. So when there is data stored in open formats like Delta Lake and files, so there are containers, there are files, and it's like a folder structure, right? So you can have n levels of structure, folder structure for keeping those data sets. Now, what happens is, if it's not managed or not governed, soon you will find data lake becomes swamp, and it's very difficult to manage. So data catalog, so metadata is the key here, using certain tool, whichever doesn't matter, to catalog the data and store as much metadata as possible. For example, source, the time, what type of metadata is structural, operational, or business, retention policy, for example, classification, and that particularly wrapper or a layer about it and data lake helps in managing such things. So yes, in fact, before I started this program for public sector, I just started 3 months back. I was with one of the global telecom, one of the giant. There also it was similar structure, but they were in Google and these public sector is in Azure. That's the only difference. But the approach taken is exactly same. Go for move away from RDBMS. We know it, right? Oracle or DB2 or SQL all these are very difficult to manage. The operations overhead is very high, and probably data warehouse on top of it is not easy to manage and operate. But on a NoSQL type, it's Medallion architecture. We can have both type of business application, data warehouse and BI, AI, advanced analytics, and so on. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from the floor or remotely? Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add, which probably hasn't been mentioned directly, it's just from personal experience, is sequencing. Because I think, you know, certainly in small scale migrations anyway, but even in, I guess, the larger things, really moving from one system to another, I think Sharon's already mentioned about the architecture being different. Well, that invariably means that sequencing of that data load needs to be planned in some detail. I mean, we all know that master data needs to you know, go before transaction data and so on. We get all that, but actually, in a recent migration I did for a client, only from between two Microsoft products, from the Vision into Dynamics F&O, it was horrendous, the amount of sequencing that we had to do to get it right. And then the other thing, a bit of advice I'd offer is practice. Practice, and have a playbook. So have a playbook, and I think Atul Sai mentioned, I think, Parsi, which is a version of a RACI matrix. So have a really strong RACI or Parsi structure to what you're doing, so that's really clear who's doing what, when, and what the sequence is. On what, just again, I would offer, give everything a unique reference number, every step a unique reference number, so that as the group, and I think Atul mentioned, keep it as small as you need it to be. Don't make it massive if you don't need to, but keep that language and the sequencing and the communication really clear. So when we talk about step 1A, everybody knows what step 1A is. And then practically, sometimes these things take a long time. So as part of the playbook, time how long it takes. Time it. So that you know when you can take a break. When the team can take a break, or when we have to hand off to somebody else, that somebody else might be to a different team in a different part of the world to carry on. It might simply be to let the team have beer and pizza, well, not too much beer, obviously, but, you know, a bit of downtime for a couple of hours. So those practical things, you know, Atul mentioned about the people, you know, looking after the people, make sure it's really clear. And so that when you go into it for real, you've done it before, you've done it as many times as you were allowed to do it, and you've had success. Yeah, so you've seen it all the way through. And even with this recent project, we still had some glitches at the end because, of course, things move. If things move and there's a data set, but what you find is you don't get huge errors on huge data sets. You get specific examples of a data set that maybe wasn't there when you tested. Yeah, but it's very small volume normally. You've carried the can, you know, sorry, you've carried the program of all the major data sets, you know, there's significant volumes, and therefore you can say, well, look, actually, sometimes, and I use the phrase, and my clients laugh, I just say, sometimes it's tippy typing. Sometimes there's going to be some transactions that aren't worth automating because they are so infrequent. To actually automate them would mean you'd have to like spend an awful lot of time, all the rules you have to build in. No, you take them out and you sequence them as part of your playbook. No, now it's time for tippy typing. Yeah, that's what would be my kind of top of worth, really. Yeah. Anything else, guys? Anybody else? Any more thoughts before we look to move to close? Yeah, no. Okay. Look, I just want to firstly thank Atul for his patience and for the fantastic presentation, because we were due to start and we had a delay. Thank everybody for their patience, for bearing with us. What I would normally have done is a bit of an overview of BCS, so on. I didn't do that tonight because there wasn't really had enough time, really. But just to say, if anybody's attending and they're not already a BCS member, then the branch does have a discount scheme. I think it's 20%, I think, for first year membership if that was of interest. Okay. And our next event that we're looking to run, I think I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we can do something in late November, and that will be due regarding digital divide work that I'm personally involved in. I'm just trying to get some people lined up to do some bits, and that would be a joint event with the digital divide specialist group. So that's the next. But look out for that. You get that by email. Be probably towards the end of November is the plan. And then we've got an AGM. We've got a plan really probably for December, early December.
In January, Craig, what's the time of the talking?
Yeah. And so what we're going to be doing as a committee, we're meeting again in November. We're going to try and reach out to the members. So we've got about 600 members. And obviously we don't see everybody, well, that's fine. People can think as well. But we want to try and gain some traction this year. Now that we're well past COVID, we've got technical issues aside, we do have normally a very good hybrid experience in this room. And so what we want to do is build on that and try and grow. So we'll be reaching out to the membership with some questionnaires. So if you can fill those in when you get them, again, it'll be towards the end of the year. Just try and let us know what's going on really, and what your preferences might be.